All right. Now, let's look at the context with DLT-specific project in supply chain. And really, since 2019, early 2019, actually late 2018, the first implementation of supply chain project which utilize and leverage DLT started. And what we learned from those very, very first implementation is the type of challenges that we faced. And 4 types of challenges, 5 actually. The wrong lenses on the ROI, the complexity theme, which manifested in itself in more than one level, the node asymmetry type of issue, and then the power node issue, which, as we will see, is also an interoperability problem. So let's look at those challenges. So what is the ROI perspective? Well, some of the challenge that really emerged from those first pilot projects in attempting to adopt DLT in supply chain came from large corporations who thought, DLT is going to enhance our efficiencies. But the reality is that when they started those projects, they looked at those projects from the angle of their particular situation, forgetting that actually they're just one node in the context of a broader ecosystem. And so the problem there was justifying the ROI, the return on investment. If you look at the ROI on a DLT supply chain project from the perspective of one node only, chances are you're going to miss out on actually some of the reasons why you would implement ROI in the first place. So the key there, the solution, is really illustrated in that diagram at the bottom, which is you need to look at the value proposition of your DLT supply chain project, not from the lenses of one node, but you probably need to look at that across every level, every node of the ecosystem. So the technique there is start from the end, start from the consumer side, and start exploring the value proposition node by node, category of node by category of nodes. Then and then only, going back all the way to source, you will be able to contemplate and look at the total return on investment for some of those projects. And what might come up from that analysis is actually the fact that the way you were going to found that particular project might be slightly different to what you might think of as a node, even if you are an important node in that ecosystem. So that's one of the first challenge and solution to DLT in supply chain, ROI perspective. Second problem, first side of a complexity problem, the complexity of implementation. Some of the feedback that we gathered from the first implementers, large management system providers, large corporations, larger consultancy firms implementing those projects was and had to do with the complexity of implementations. If you think about the fact that a single factory, no matter what industry, let's say automotive industry, for example, a single factory would have a supply chain composed of anything between 800 to 1,500 suppliers. You start having a dimension, you start having and grasping the complexity of the type of project we're talking about here. How do we bring all of those independent actors together? How do we get them to actually act within the context of one single initiative? So what I'm saying there is that DLT implementation per definition are not conventional projects. They are complex projects, very, very large number of actors. And so we need new methodology. We need new tools to be able to do that. Complex management type of tools, such as, for example, document control type of project management platforms. Complexity manifests itself from a different angle too. And that has to do with risk surface and security. So some of the very, very early learning with those DLT supply chain problems had to do with the type of protocol being implemented. And some of those protocols are built in such a way that they never challenged the existence and nature of those legacy ERP systems, which, by the way, are unlikely to change in the context of larger nodes. But the issue with that, and this is really illustrated in the left part of that diagram, is that those protocols, so protocols such as Ethereum or Hyperledger or Corba or other protocols are conceived as additional layers. And this creates a particular situation, which is you increase the risk surface. And so you create basically more opportunity for hackers to damage or threaten the entire ecosystems. So this, for example, is quite the opposite with some other protocols, such as Sky protocol, where anything which has to do with security is built at the core. And because of this, well, we don't need to increase risk surface. Indeed, it decreases risk surface rather than increase it. So that's another aspect on complexity. A third layer on complexity, still with security, is really the fact that security measure, cyber security needs to be brought to a brand new level when you implement that type of ecosystem. So where you were already probably looking at security on a deep level as a single node, well, the ecosystem is going to bring a risk aspect which needs to be tackled and managed properly. And so all sorts of additional ways there of looking at security and enforcing security. Another challenge which emerged from those first DLT implementation in supply chain is what is coined as node asymmetry. What do we mean by that? Well, we mean the fact that those first initiatives were triggered by rather large corporations, and they were trying to put all of their supply chain in their ecosystem. And of course, if one of those nodes in the ecosystem is missing, well, that's compromising the quality of the implementation. And so some of the issues that were faced during implementation were with the smaller players. Just to illustrate that, imagine that you are a rare earth type of mining provider, so you're very, very essential to our supply chain. If, for example, you are an electronic manufacturer, you might need a certain compound there that can be found only in a specific area. Imagine that the logistics of bringing that particular rare earth to your production plant is actually with a small operator. Why would that small operator bother or invest time or invest money in actually complying with your requirement from a DLT perspective? That is what we call node asymmetry. There's immediately inequality of returns and daunting type of barriers for smaller players in large ecosystems. And so the key problem there came from the system side, which is most of the systems, often when those DLT projects are driven by large corporations, the ERP provider tend to be involved. And those systems, per definition, are very, very expensive, right? In the order of millions of dollars. And that doesn't necessarily match the economic reality of those smaller nodes. So there's a need there to have a bottom-up provider where you are able to solve that node asymmetry. Otherwise, you compromise the quality of the entire DLT supply chain ecosystem that you are trying to build. Last but not least, last but indeed very, very important, the issue of a power node. So what is a power node? Well, the term power node was coined with one particular type of problem that those DLT implementation faced, and that is the problem with port authorities or tax office or custom duties. I mean, those agencies, those nodes are very, very important in the context of the supply chain ecosystem you're trying to build. But their argument was, well, why would we go with your protocol? Because, you know, you are one manufacturer, but here I've got another manufacturer and they're using a different protocol. So what happened with those power nodes was the fact that two problems. Number one, they were regulated, they are regulated type of nodes. So think about a tax office or a port authority, and they cannot be biased. They cannot favor one protocol with respect to another. And so one of the key problems that manifested themselves, you know, with those first implementation was really that issue in interoperability, which is you can't really do DLT supply chain if you do not first solve the problem of protocol interoperability in DLT. Okay, how is that interoperability solved? Well, it actually is not. To this day, most of the attempt to solve DLT protocol interoperability has been to try to implement something similar to what happened with email back in 1996, which is the simple mail transfer protocol type of agreement. But the problem with that is that blockchain is not email. And while that SMTP approach worked with email, it is not working with blockchain. In fact, we are seeing a different trend. We're seeing the multiplication of protocols, not the streamlining of protocol. Per definition, DLT is about distribution and decentralization. Nobody likes the idea of a meta protocol or the idea of a multi-chain. In fact, it's getting ridiculous in the sense that today you've got more meta chain than DLT protocol themselves. So definitely that direction is failing. It's not they're not going to disappear, but they're not going to be the solution to true interoperability. So what is that solution? Well, where we see a solution, and I'm going to illustrate that in a minute, there's in the Baltics right now, a pilot going on here in Klaipėda, port of Klaipėda, and that pilot, one of the objective of that pilot is to solve once and for all the interoperability problem. How? Well, the idea there is to do something equivalent to what has already happened in the area of cryptocurrency. So in the world of cryptocurrency, there is a big non-blockchain reality, which is called an exchange. And that is the place where, well, different cryptocurrency exchange between themselves and exchange also with traditional currencies. And that is a technical solution which is not very much liked, you know, in the area of cryptocurrency operators, but the reality is that it exists and it's here to stay. And it represents already large volumes. If you think about a crypto exchange today, you know, the volumes are north of $3 or $5 million per day, right? So this is something which is here to stay. And so the key concept which is being materialized as we speak is to do something similar to a cryptocurrency exchange, but not with cryptocurrency, but with DLT data. So a DLT data port, if that makes sense. And the idea there is different protocol, different data operating over different protocol get exchanged. Of course, the concept is simple, but the key aspect of this and the connection with Power Node is that you need a regulated environment to be able to do that. You need an environment where not only you've got accreditation and compliance and very, very demanding type of regulation to ensure the security of those transactions. But you need all of this to be in place. And that is the case, by the way, with cryptocurrency exchange, which are heavily regulated. So, hence, the connection there between power nodes, port authority, tax offices, custom agent, and a possible solution to DLT interoperability, which in our view should be centralized within the context of those particular operators.